to the 7th lecture on understanding the basics of costing. We have already seen the fundamentals, the differences between financial and cost accounting, the cost accounting principles, need, objectives, and various definitions. And next, a detail of the various classifications of cost by elements, traceability, variability, function, and other classifications. And next, the details on how to do the apportionment and reapportionment for absorbing the overheads was also understood. And then machine hour rate calculation was done in the last lecture. And in this lecture, we are going to the next important topic on the final statement that is prepared out of job costing is cost sheet. The statement that is prepared out of cost accounting is your cost sheet, and we'll see the first components, prime cost and factory cost in this lecture. So you were already introduced to cost sheet during the classification of costs. Which classification did you hear on cost sheet? Yes, you are right. If you have guessed as, or if you are aware that it is the division of functional classification, you have seen the various functions. So in that, I told you on cost sheet and how to, what are the various components of cost sheet. We'll see here in detail about cost sheet. So cost sheet has various components. You have a total cost, and each component of the total cost can be viewed in the cost sheet, and it helps in analysis and seeing the various components in detail. And you can also in each component you can find the cost per unit. So this is the use of cost sheet. Cost sheet may be a one which is prepared with the actual data, that is past data, historical data. The actual cost sheet is prepared, and for further costing or budgeting you can estimate the cost and you prepare an estimated cost sheet. So this is the one that is regularly done in industry, so it is a very important topic. But for this topic you need an understanding of the basic classification of costs. So the importance of cost sheet is given here, listed. It presents the total cost in a logical classification. So it classifies. You will see the classification. You will see the elemental classification. You will see functional classification, and on traceability also you will see. So these three classifications are included, and that will be logically presented in the cost sheet along with the total cost. So it facilitates in cost ascertainment, where the cost is actually happening, where the flaws are going on, that can be easily identified using cost sheet. So it helps in determining the cost per unit at various stages, whether it is in factory or whether after the adding the administration and after adding the selling and distribution, which stage, in each stage you can find the cost per unit. And the final cost per unit also you can find. So it assists in help in finding the selling price of a product. You can compare 2-3 products based on cost sheet, and it helps in effective cost control and cost comparison. So it helps in improving the efficiency, and where the inefficiency is occurring, that can be identified using the cost sheet, and this helps in rectifying the problems that are happening. So it is useful in corrective measures. So, and it also prepares the estimates which can be used in tender. So with the actual data, if you prepare the historical cost sheet, and with that you can predict the budgeted cost sheet or estimate of for a product, you can give an estimated cost sheet, which will be helpful in submitting tenders and quotations for the outside agencies. So cost sheet is a very important statement. The components of the cost sheet are prime cost, factory or works cost, cost of production, total cost or cost of sales, and finally sales. The cost, prime cost, not the primary cost, it is prime cost. The prime cost includes direct material, direct labor, and direct expenses. So all these are happening in the factory and that which are directly involved. Direct means it is traceable based on the product or based on the labor or on the expenses. So it is traceable based on the, what is that term? Hope you remember, based on the cost center. So if you are tracing based on a cost center, then it is a prime cost. If it is not traceable for a particular product or a cost center, then it is not a direct cost. So direct may be material, labor, and expenses as we saw in the elemental classifications. So the total of these three is the prime cost. For any product, it becomes the prime cost. Then uh, works or factory cost includes prime cost plus factory overheads. The factory overheads include the indirect material, indirect labor, and indirect expenses that are happening only inside the factory. So it is for the working, or it is totally dealt with the working in the production. So it is called as factory cost or manufacturing cost, production cost. All these things are the terms used. If terms may be used differently, you have to be very careful with the terms. It is the terminology prescribed for cross sheet, and you cannot have different terminologies on your own to have in the cost sheet. So next is the third item in the cost sheet is cost of production or office and administrative cost. In this, the factory cost is added along with the office and administrative expenses. So this is termed as cost of production. After including the administration, you get the total cost of production. There it is production cost and here it is cost of production. So these terms you have to be very careful. So it is also called as office and administrative cost or total cost of production. Then the next term, the fourth item is total cost or cost of sales. This includes the cost of production plus the selling and distribution expenses. So this is the final cost, and if you add the profit along with that, then it becomes the sales. So these are the 5 items in your cost sheet, and this has to follow this order and no change of terminologies can be used because it is a cost sheet prescribed format. So here it is given as simply for your better understanding. Prime includes direct material, direct labor, direct expenses. Factory includes prime plus factory overheads. Office cost or cost of production includes factory cost plus administrative expenses. Cost of sales or total cost includes total cost of production plus selling and distribution overheads. Then finally, sales is cost of sales plus profit. So finally, you get the price of the product, that is the sales. So this is also a pictorial representation for getting a better understanding. Now we'll start with the problem. No, I have given examples for prime costs here. So direct cost in a spinning mill. What are the direct costs? Yes, it is. If it is a cotton spinning, then it is cotton. If it is a blended cotton, and if it is a blended, what is the blend? If it is polyester, cotton and polyester, or cotton and viscose, or polyester and viscose. So the cost incurred for buying these or purchase of these raw materials are called as direct costs. Then in garment manufacturing, the fabric, the buttons, labels that you purchase are all direct materials. In a weaving industry, yarn purchase is a direct material cost. In knitting industry also, yarn purchase is a direct material. So, hope you are aware with the examples of direct materials. Now, direct labor, yes, when you pay as wages per hour or per piece usually, then it is a direct labor. If it is a salaried, uh, irrespective of the time or any other basis, then it will become indirect, like your supervisor. So that is not here in the prime cost. In direct expenses, usually direct expenses are very rare. Say you pay a royalty for example in textiles is you pay a royalty for using a certain type of logo or print on for your t-shirt, not the materials that I'm talking about, but you pay a royalty for every piece that is produced for that design. So a designer may have got copyright for the design. If you want to use the design, then you have to pay some royalty for per piece. Then it becomes a direct expense. Usually, the main example for direct expense is royalty. So the total of these three things, which are there, which can be traced directly to any product, is called as prime cost. So can you calculate the prime cost? Yes, it is very simple. Direct material plus direct labor and direct expenses. So prime cost is direct material, labor and expenses. So it is 40,000, 30,000 and 25,000. The prime cost is 95,000. Now we'll see another problem for calculating prime cost with some adjustments for inventories. So if you are not, say if you, for a particular product, if it is for discount, you purchase a raw material and you do not completely replenish it. So you have to find it is always the mixing is present, and it takes some months for a particular lot of raw material to get completed, and in between you start buying the same variety of cotton for producing that the same count of yarn. So then in these cases, the material is not totally replenished. It is a continuous process. Then you will have a opening and the closing stock of raw material. So you have an opening stock of some 100 bales, for example. Then and the value of those 100 bales is 20,000. It is I'm saying it very cheap. So if it's 50 bales, then and it is 20,000. Example. And in that month you have purchased some more 100 or 150 bales, and the cost for those purchases is 1,22,000. And then again at the end you have produced some amount of product, and the end of the month you have some 20 bales remaining, and the cost for the bales are 10,000. So these are the values of the stock that is there. From this, you have to find the direct material that is used. And then direct wages and direct expenses are given directly. So can you calculate? So I will show the calculation now here. So let us see the problem. I have given the values here, the particulars and the value for that opening stock, purchases, closing stock, direct wages and direct expenses. The values are given. Here no kg or other units are used because we are dealing with the costing. All are in terms of money, the value of that product, that component particular. So now we'll start the format of cost sheet. Cost sheet will have this format. So the particulars and the total cost, and the next column may be cost per unit, which we'll see later. And for now, particulars, and the second column is total cost and the value for that in rupees. So the first we will write, it is direct. We are going to calculate the direct materials or the materials that are consumed. So what all data we have? We have opening stock. We have to add this opening stock. First we had an opening stock, and with that opening stock we have purchased. So we have to add the purchases. The purchases are rupees 1,22,000. So we have to add with that. And next but at the end there is some closing stock remaining, which means that is not used. So you are subtracting the closing stock of and the value of that closing stock. So less means subtraction. So addition means plus and less means subtraction. So now you get you can calculate the cost of raw material, or may be termed as direct materials or materials consumed. The value you have should have got is 1,32,000. So 20,000 plus 1,22,000 minus 10,000 is this 1,32,000. Now for calculation of prime cost, you have to add direct materials, already given direct wages and direct expenses. You have to add those things to get the prime cost. So now you have calculated the prime cost with adjustment for inventories. So because the opening and closing stock are inventories that are there. Purchase you usually do, but already you had a stock and you have stock at the end also. So this is a calculation of prime cost along with inventory. Now we are going to see what are the factory overheads. There is a mistake in the spelling. It is factory overheads. So what are factory overheads? That we have already seen direct material, labor and expenses. Apart from these three things that are related directly to the product, apart from these direct costs, all other costs that are incurred in the factory are called as indirect costs because they are not directly traceable to the manufacturing product. So again, based on the elements, it is again classified as uh, indirect material, indirect labor and expenses, which we have seen already. Those indirect material, indirect labor and indirect expenses that are occurring, that are incurred in the factory are called as factory overheads. We have already seen the definition, but I'm revising that again so that it will be helpful in calculating the factory cost in a better way. So indirect materials are oil, other lubricants, gears, all those things that are happening in the industry. Indirect labor are supervisors, cleaners, maintenance people involved in cleaning the factory. And the indirect expenses are the depreciation of the machinery that are there in the factory, other equipments in the factory, the vehicles that are working for the factory, the factory building depreciation, all those things are included. Only depreciation is included, not the cost of purchase, capital cost. So depreciation of the capital is included in indirect expenses for the factory. That which are there only in the factory are included. And next, electricity, water, telephone, rent of the factory, tax for the factory, insurance for the factory are all included in indirect expenses. So these are all collectively called as overheads, or since it is occurring in the factory, it is factory overheads. The examples of factory overheads: factory rent, power, material, indirect material wage, supervisor salary, drawing officer salary, factory insurance, the asset depreciation. So we saw already. Now we have some simple calculation, factory cost calculation. We have the following particulars: direct material, direct wages, direct expenses, and factory overheads. I'm showing the calculation in the Excel sheet. Factory cost calculation for the cost sheet. So we have the four particulars. So we'll prepare the cost sheet. So for preparing cost sheet, we have to put the tabular column, the headings. I have put three columns now. So first we have the direct materials. If the direct materials are not given directly, or we have some purchases and stocks remaining, then we have to calculate directly. We cannot calculate, put it directly. We have to show that in the cost sheet, which we have seen in the earlier problem. But in this problem, we have the direct materials value given directly, then direct wages, direct expenses. So we'll first calculate the prime cost. Hope you are aware. The sum of direct material, wages and expenses is the prime cost. Then we are adding the So I'm putting, since it is a total, we have to put it on the next column so that we will not confuse it with the when we total it. So in the format, they usually put it on the right side, the total. So the price, total of these three things, put it on the right side. Then add factory overheads and you will get the factory cost. So you are getting the factory overheads. So you are adding the factory overheads, you get the factory cost. So this is the calculation for factory cost. We'll see the next problem for factory cost calculation in the cost sheet. We have a number of particulars that are given, and now we have to find the factory cost. I'm showing the problem in the Excel sheet. We have the factory cost calculation. We have various particulars. We have direct material, direct wages, and direct expenses. So it is easy to calculate the prime cost from this. Then we have certain particulars. We have to identify what are these things. So it is factory rent. We know it is an indirect expense, factory power indirect expense. Then we have indirect material, which is in directly given indirect material. Then indirect wages is given. Then drawing of his salary is an indirect expense. Factory insurance is an indirect expense. Factory asset depreciation is an indirect expense. Now we'll put that in the cost sheet format. So in the cost sheet we have three columns. As I already said, we should have three columns so that there is no confusion in checking the values. We have direct materials, direct wages, and direct expenses given. The sum of these three are will give the prime cost. So it is easy to calculate prime cost. Now we'll calculate the factory overheads. So what are the factory overheads? We have factory rent, factory power, indirect materials, indirect wages, drawing officer salary, factory insurance, factory asset depreciation. So the sum of these all will give you the total factory overheads. And finally, for the calculation of factory cost, it is the sum of prime cost and factory overheads. So you now get the factory cost, which is 1,17,500. Hope you are clear with the till factory cost calculation in the cost sheet.